So we're going to start talking about on page 1, what is engagement? It's kind of a big word and kind of a strange word for something that you're doing in ministry. But for most of you, you are aware that we divide our year into 3 different segments. We've got affirmation that happens January through March or April, and that's a time when we really reach out and support our participating partners, people who have already been in the ministry with us. Then in April, from April till about July or August, we're in what we call our engagement period, which is the time that we are reaching out to non-participating groups. And then we change to support in August through the end of the year, where we're very actively supporting physically packing parties that are happening or collections that are happening, providing resources, that sort of thing. So engagement, the simple definition of engagement, is that it is sharing the ministry of Operation Christmas Child effectively with non-participating churches, groups, individuals, and media outlets. And a couple of points I want to make about this definition. The first thing is, you'll notice that the word there is sharing. We are simply sharing the ministry with people. And I highlight that because I want you to feel the freedom in that this is very similar in my mind to what it means to share the gospel. We are called to share the gospel, and the Lord prepares hearts, and he calls people to the ministry, and he provides the increase. And it's very same thing with us with engagement. We are called to put the information out there, to share it with people who don't know, and then we can be free to let the results be what the results will be, knowing that the Lord will prepare the people in advance who are going to participate with us. The other thing I want to highlight here is that effectively is part of the definition. And you are all volunteers on this call, and you have chosen to dedicate your time and your efforts and your energy and your gifts to this ministry. And so if you're going to be involved in engaging new partners, we want you to be able to be effective. I know no one came onto this team to be mediocre or to not see fruit. All of you have a heart to see more children hear the gospel. And so really the purpose of this call today is to help you grow in your effectiveness. If you're going to be doing this, we want you to be effective. So my hope is that I can share a few tips with you today that will enable you to increase in your effectiveness and your confidence and your skill level in engaging new partners. And then the third thing I want to point out is that prayer must go before us in this. As I mentioned before, God is the one who provides the harvest. God's the one who prepares the hearts. And so I definitely want to encourage all of you to be praying before you approach anyone about this ministry. And I know that seems kind of like a silly thing to say in a Christian ministry. Of course we're praying, but some of you may be wired like me, where you're more task oriented and you can just get started with things and jump into things and maybe forget to be really prayerful about it. And so just want to encourage you in that. And I know we have quite a few prayer team members on this call. And so I want to encourage those of you who are not prayer team members to reach out to the prayer team members that are serving your team, if you have them. They have come onto this team to pray for you, to open doors in prayer, to beseech the Lord on your behalf. And so I just want to encourage you to reach out to them and ask them to pray. Give them your list of groups or churches or individuals, prayer groups that you're reaching out to, and allow them the privilege of praying for that for you. And prayer team members, for those of you on this call, if you are not getting a lot of requests from team members during this time of year, please reach out to them. Be proactive. Reach out and say, listen, I know that you're working on engagement right now. How can I pray for you? Who are the groups or the churches or the prayer network partners you're wanting to bring on, and how can I pray for you? So definitely we want prayer to go before us. All right, moving on to page 2, I want to talk about why are we wanting to engage prospects? And again, this may seem like kind of a stupid question to ask, and why wouldn't we want to engage more people in our ministry? But I think it's very much worth talking about. We want to engage prospects. Obviously, the easy answer is we want to involve more people in this ministry. We want more people to know about what we're doing. We want to increase shoeboxes in our area. So that's the simple reason why we engage. But I also want to share a few statistics with you that I think will strengthen that argument in your mind and really cement why this particular time period is so critical for us as a ministry and specifically for us as a region. So I want you to think just for a minute, and nobody will be able to answer because we're all on mute, but I want you to think about, how many churches do you think in the Bible Belt, in the states of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, what percentage of churches would you imagine are participating in our ministry? And just get that number in your head. And I just want to share with you that only 24% of churches in our region are participating with us. And I don't know if that number shocks anybody else, but it always shocks me to say it. We live in the Bible Belt. We have a church on every corner. And I'm honestly discontented with this number. I'm not satisfied with this number. And I would imagine most of you are not satisfied with this number. But I think it just reminds me of how important this engagement season is and how much we do need to spend time in prayer about it and shore ourselves up and equip ourselves for it. Because it is so important. We want to see that number increase. I mean, personally, I would love that number to be 75%. I don't know why it cannot be. But it's 24% right now, and so we're really seeking to increase that. And then we don't have the same kind of hard data on community groups that we do on churches, but I can tell you that I feel certain that we have even a smaller percentage of community groups participating with us. We have a fewer number of community team members on our teams, and so I feel certain that there's lots of opportunity out there for community groups. Just so you know, right now in our region, we have 7,348 churches that are participating with us. We have 350 community groups that are participating with us. So we just know that can greatly increase. And so I so appreciate all of you for being on this call and being dedicated to learning more and growing that number. Like, let's work together to increase that this year. And then finally, I want to share our Prayer Network partnership number. That's another group that we're actively engaging right now and wanting to increase. And that number right now, we have 1,300 Prayer Network partners in our region, which we praise the Lord for. That's an amazing number. But I believe in my heart we could easily have 10,000 people praying for us in this region. It's a low commitment level to be a Prayer Network partner. It involves praying for us once a month and committing to that. And so we definitely want to see that number increase. And so that is why we're on this call. We want to grow our participation in this area. And one reason that we don't have higher coverage, I'll just throw this out there, one reason is because we don't have full coverage on our area teams. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but I've done a little bit of research on how much coverage we have in our region. And I've thought about it in terms of a football team where you have 11 people on a football team and on the field for a particular team. And when you take the numbers, when I look at the number of drop-off locations that we have, and if I assume that we want to have, a team member for each ministry area supporting each drop-off location, and then I do the math and see how much coverage do we actually have as a team. Right now, with the number of volunteers we have about 2 people that are on our football team. So we're about 9 people short of having what I would consider full coverage in our region. So we know that there's going to be gaps there, but I do believe that as we shore ourselves up and equip ourselves in engagement, we can see those numbers increase. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I think it's also important to talk about why aren't churches participating with us? If we see that there's a need here, why wouldn't a church or a group or a person want to be involved with us? And I think there's 2 main reasons for that. I think number one, there's still a lot of churches, groups, individuals that have not heard about our ministry. I think when we're in our OCC bubble, we tend to think everybody knows about what we're doing. And if your church or group participates, you tend to think everybody knows. But there are still so many groups and churches and people who do not know about us. And for those of you on church relations, you probably realize we are fairly Baptist heavy. That's a denomination that when you scan our drop-off logs, we see a large percentage of our churches are Baptist, and that's great. But there are lots of other denominations out there, and we know as we look down the road 3 or 4 or 5 years, in order for our ministry to grow, we are going to need to diversify. We are going to need to have people from different groups, from different denominations, participating with us. And so we're wanting to put some strategy behind this. Another reason that people don't participate with us is because they are misinformed. And this is a huge percentage of the population out there that they've heard about Operation Shoebox, as a lot of people call it. They know that we pack a shoebox, but they have no idea about the multiplication, evangelism, and discipleship behind what we do. And I am 100% convinced if we can get an audience with people, if we can share with them what we're doing, they are going to be interested in participating with us. I just believe that. So one of the strategies we'll talk about today is the importance of just getting an audience with someone. I believe if we can do that and share with them about our ministry, they will be interested in participating. All right, moving on to page 3, couple of wins for engagement. Anytime that we're putting information out there for you, we want to be really clear about what is a win, or basically what does it look like to be successful in engagement. Well, one of those wins is obvious. We want to see an increase in the churches, groups, prayer network partners, media outlets. We want to see those increase. And hopefully every one of you on this call has already, during the ministry planning phase of our year, has already set some goals for how many churches or groups or prayer network partners you want to be able to add this year. Hopefully, if you've looked at your schedule and you've looked at your available time, and you've looked at the list of people you want to reach out to, and you're able to set a goal for yourself. And that you've also been able to look at your area and put together some sort of strategy. You know, who are the groups that I most want to get involved? Who are the most likely to participate? Who has the most potential to pack a lot of boxes? You know, that you're really looking at that and being thoughtful about that. So number one win is that by the end of the year, you will have been able to bring on several new churches, groups, or prayer network partners. Number 2, our second win is going to be adding numbers that you can effectively support. That's adding numbers you can effectively support. And what that means is that we're always looking for very purposeful growth. And the last thing I want to see is for you as a community relations team member, if you're already supporting 10 or 15 community groups, for you to go out and bring on 20 or 30 new groups. Because if you bring on 20 or 30 new groups, which would be fantastic, wouldn't it? I mean, that would be a miracle in and of itself. But if you brought on that many groups, you would have a difficult time supporting them well. And so I just want to call attention to the fact that your first priority is to support the participating groups and churches and prayer network partners that we already have, and to do that really well and with a high level of quality, and to build a relationship with those people. And then you turn your attention to bringing on these new groups, churches, and prayer network partners. And you're really trying to be intentional about reaching a number that you feel like you can still adequately support and have a relationship with as you bring them on. So what that means to you is just thinking through, you know, how many churches, groups, or people do I want to approach about being involved with us? And maybe not sending out a mass email to 5,000 people, and, you know, maybe controlling your efforts just a bit. But I also want to throw this out there, and this isn't really hard data, but we do know from talking to some of our area coordinators that typically for every 5 churches, groups, or individuals that you approach, you are going to get a presentation with 2 of those. You're going to get an audience with 2 of those. And for every presentation that's made, typically 100% of people that we present to end up participating. So that just kind of gives you an idea. If you want to add, you know, 5 new groups this year, then you probably need to reach out to 20 in order to see, and I hope that math is right, but in order for you to see 5 groups come on, you probably need to reach out to 20. Or 5 churches, reach out to 20. And so it kind of helps to be just thoughtful about that, and thoughtful about where you're casting your seeds, and how many people you're actually reaching out to. So the third win, the first one is increasing number. Second is adding numbers you can support. The third win is we want to pique the interest of the people that we're reaching out to. And so this really speaks to having a compelling message, and a couple of other things that we're going to talk about today. Tips for how we can really compel people to listen to us or to give us an audience. And then number 4, the fourth win, is to be able to have the opportunity to make a presentation to a person who's interested in being a prayer network partner, or to a community group or a church. And so our goal is to first pique their interest, and then for them to open the door for us to make a presentation to them. So that's our ultimate goal, is making that presentation. All right, moving on to the next page, we're now going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to engage. And I'm basically going to boil it down into 3 R's of engagement today, the 3 R's of engagement. And those are on-ramp, research, and relate. And so I'm going to talk about each one of those for just a few minutes. So the first R is on-ramp. And most of you are probably familiar with this kind of terminology, but basically it's thinking about a highway and how you have the ramps that enter onto the highway. And when you think about that, the purpose of those is to allow people to gradually, safely, easily ease on to the interstate, rather than just plopping right in the middle of it and having to go 90 miles per hour. At least that's what would happen here in Atlanta. If, and start having to drive really quickly, it allows them to easily, gradually, safely get onto the highway. And so when we're thinking about bringing people onto our highway of ministry, the highway of Operation Christmas Child, we want to be intentional and strategic about providing on-ramps for them. What are ways that we can bring them on gradually and let them experience the ministry before we really ask them to commit to participating with us? So the first point under on-ramps is, first of all, we want you to start with who you know. And this is probably true in anything you go to do. I know I see this a lot with my brother-in-law's business. He buys and sells cars, and his business is almost 100% built on referrals. So people buy a car from him, they refer somebody else, and then he has an in. He has a warm lead. And we know that warm leads are always better than cold calls. So think about who you know, and not only who you know, but who do the people you know. Who are their sphere of influence, and how can you broaden your sphere of influence by utilizing the sphere of influence of those around you? And so I want y'all to take just a second when we get off this call. I'd love for you to discipline yourself just to sit for a couple of minutes and kind of consider this your homework for today. But I'd like for everybody to write down a list of people that you know that either go to a church that doesn't participate, or are involved in some type of group that doesn't participate, or a person who's a prayer warrior that you know that is not participating in our Prayer Network partnership. And just get you a good list going of all those people you know and people that you know, and try to get 10 or 15 people on that list and start there. And then once you have a list of people that you know, the second point here is we want to give those people opportunities to experience the ministry. So I think it's going to be much more effective where you have opportunity if you can get people involved little by little than just going and making a presentation to somebody. That always gives you a broader platform. So a couple of examples of this. One that I love is the good old packing party. Packing parties are great on-ramps for engaging new groups, new churches, new people. And I know several people who have held neighborhood packing parties, just invited some people from their neighborhood that they knew. I held one year, and there were 6 different churches represented there, and not all of those churches were packing boxes. So I had an opportunity to share the ministry with some people whose churches weren't participating. There were several groups represented there, people that were involved in tennis teams or book clubs. And so there's so much opportunity there. So a packing party is a great way to bring people together. It's fun, it's social, it's engaging, and then it enables you to share with people, hey, if you're not doing this at your church or group, would you like to? And we'll talk about that ask here in just a second. So packing parties are great. And I'll share an idea from our Birmingham North team. They have a very strategic plan for engaging this year. Each of the team members have a list of the churches that they're going to be reaching out to. And they have planned a packing party for late in July that they're going to be inviting all the people that they've been engaging. So if they've talked to somebody at a church or talk to somebody in a church, they will invite them to this packing party, and then they'll pack together. And so it kind of gives them an idea of, this is what you're signing up for, this is what it will look like at your church, this is how much fun it is, and really expand their knowledge about the ministry, which I think is a great idea. So packing parties are great. Another great example, I have a volunteer who has a lunch at her house once a month, and her gift is hospitality. She loves getting people together, and she just invites different people from her sphere of influence over for lunch once a month on a Sunday after church. And she cooks something from a particular country, and she shares about that country, and then she shares about Operation Christmas Child, and she encourages people to get involved that way. And then another great idea is crafting. I know several of you have crafting parties or crafting get-togethers, but oftentimes people are looking for ways to do artistic things or to learn a skill. So if you host how to knit a scarf, or how to put together a sock puppet, or how to make a necklace, you might get a really interesting group of people that would come to that, and then you have an audience to share about the ministry with. And then finally, with Prayer Network partners, for those of you who are prayer team members, this is really the purpose of the prayer conference calls that we encourage for you quarterly, or prayer brunches or breakfasts, or just small intimate prayer groups where you're inviting people to come and pray. And so prayer groups or prayer meetings can be a great way to get people involved. So just think about who you are, how God's gifted you and crafted you, and think, what are some ways that I can bring people on into the ministry in a non-threatening, easy, fun, social way, and then share the ministry with them. And then once you have these opportunities, it's very, very important. If you're going to have this opportunity, you definitely want to issue a challenge at the end. If you have these opportunities and you do not issue a challenge, there's really not a whole lot of point in having these opportunities. So be prepared to make an ask. And some of you may be familiar with different types of parties like 31 Bags or Pampered Chef, or I don't know, jewelry, different kinds of jewelry parties that people have. And you've been to those probably, and you are familiar with the how it works. At the end of the party, they say, hey, is there anybody that would be willing to host a party at their house, for their particular group? And I think it's very similar. What we're doing here is that, we involve people in what we're doing. We see them get excited about it. And then we say, hey, would you like to do something like this for your son's soccer team and his parents? Or would you like to do this for your daughter's ballet class? Or, whatever it may be that they're involved in. Ask, is anybody willing to host something like this and I can come speak? Or is anybody willing to make a connection between me and your pastor at your church so that I can share the opportunity for your church to present? So just be thoughtful about that and be sure that you make an ask at the end of the on-ramp. All right, moving on to the second R, research. So once you have established a connection through an on-ramp, or if you are at a place where you don't have any connections, maybe you've worked all your connections and you really are at the place that you're just kind of needing to cold call, this is where your research really becomes very valuable. So the first point under research is you really need to know your audience. If you're going to be effective at engaging, you need to do your research and know something about the people that you're reaching out to. And this I always think about, I don't know if this happens to anyone else, but when I'm on my computer on the internet, all the time, all these different ads pop up, and they're usually ads that appeal to me. It'll be a Pottery Barn couch, or a yummy casserole, or something that I'm like, ooh, I want to go look at that. Or I'll go to my mailbox and I'll have all these catalogs that I've never heard of, from companies I've never heard of before, but they're strangely appealing to all my tastes. And it's because these marketers have done their research. They know us. They know what you look at on the internet. They know what websites you go to. They know what catalogs you order from. And so anyone else with a similar product is going to be hitting you with that as well. And so that's kind of where we are. We want to know the people that we're reaching out to, and we want to know how to best approach them. What are they interested in? What kinds of things are they looking at? So know your audience. That's very key, and it'll take a little bit of time, but I feel very convinced that this will open more doors for you if you do your research up front. So how do you do this research? Well, clearly the best way is on the internet, and many churches, groups have websites, and you can find out really good information there. I know some of you are from very rural areas, so this won't apply to you, but I would at least look, because even some of the smaller churches have websites now, and you can find really great information. And I'm sorry that my computer isn't working. I was going to pull up a church website that I've been researching. But basically, what you're looking for when you go and research, I always look at who do they have on staff? Who do they employ and what groups are they ministering to? So it's always interesting to see, do they have a children's pastor? Do they have a missions pastor? Do they have a student pastor? Kind of gives you an idea of where their focus is and what groups they're really working specifically with. It lets you know a little bit about the size of the church, depending on how many staff they have. I also look at their mission statement. I look at, how are they already involved globally? How are they already involved locally? And just kind of seeing what's the heartbeat of this church. I mean, obviously churches have some things in common, but there's lots of different ways to approach it. This church that I was looking at has a church planting ministry. So church planting is really key for them. So that lets me know, I think maybe a key point to share with them is that we have had thousands of churches planted through Operation Christmas Child. That might be something that, tugs at their particular heartstring. So it's very valuable to know your church or to know your group. And I just want to point out, just remind everybody that we have the GPS documents, which is an acronym for Guide to Partnership Success, on the extranet. And we've got those for churches and we've got them for groups. And these are churches or groups that we already have a national relationship with. And so those are great places to start. And there's lots of information on that GPS that tell you about the partnership, what the group is involved in, why they're partnering with us. And so it's just really good information for you. And then for those of you, the third point is, for those of you that are in more rural areas, possibly you could visit the church to find out what the DNA of that church is. And I know I'm talking specifically to church right now, but we have one volunteer who goes to different churches on Wednesday nights as she can and just kind of sees what the church is about and what kind of things they're talking about, what are they participating in, and just gives her a little more information to then go approach them about participating with us. And I want to share one really cool success story from our Birmingham South team. We have a lady who was working in a fairly rural area, and you know how it is. You call and nobody's ever at the church. You can't get a pastor, you can't get a church secretary. That's one of the challenges that we have in engagement. And so she had just gotten some clear bags from Office Max, and she had put in a promo kit and a letter that had her contact information on it, and just hung those on the doorknobs of the different churches. And she had an 85% success rate. 85% of the churches that she left these packets on their door, she ended up working with and having them participate this year. And I know that doesn't always happen because I've had some people try that and it didn't work all that well. But I just encourage you to try different things. Try different things and see what works. What works in one area might be a little bit different in another. But if you're trying a variety of things, you'll have more opportunity for success in finding what really works for you. And then finally, the last point on the slide is to channel your inner detective. I read Nancy Drew growing up, so I love doing a little bit of detective work. But it really is, I feel like this research is an opportunity for you to play detective a little bit and really find out, okay, what do I need to know about this church, or what do I need to know about this group and how they operate that will help me make an approach that's compelling to them and that really understands who they are. So research is very key. And then finally, our last R is relate. Once you know these things, once you know who you're talking to and what they're interested in, you can relate your approach to the church or the group or the person that you're talking to. It's just a great skill to have, to be able to relate to people. And as we're making our approaches to people, our recommendation would be that you first send an email or a letter. We definitely want to send some way of introduction before we make what we would call a cold call. It's great to give them an opportunity to review information ahead of time, and you can simply state in your letter or your email, I will be contacting you in the next couple of days, and we'll be following up with you. But it gives them the opportunity to at least be familiar, and when you call, it's not an unfamiliar name to them. So email or letter first, call, and then obviously the ultimate goal is to be able to get in person and just tell them, hey, I'd love to spend just 15 minutes sharing this ministry. I think looking at your website, it looks like, we have some things in common and this could be a great fit. And hopefully the goal would be for you to be able to make that presentation. Because remember, that statistic that we're seeing is that 100% of people that are presented to end up participating with us. So if you can get in the door with people and get that presentation, you have a good chance of success. And then the third point here is choose your key messages. And I'm going to provide you with a list of key messages for our ministry, but some churches, it's going to appeal to them more that we partner with the church overseas. Maybe you really want to play up that partnership piece of what we do. Or, if you've got a church with a huge student ministry or group of students, then you might want to appeal to, we've got so many great opportunities to develop leadership in young people. And this ministry is a great way for kids to be involved and to learn leadership skills. Or like I mentioned before, the church planting angle. If you've got a church that's really interested in church planting, let them know this ministry is opening doors to plant churches. So it's choosing your message wisely. What are you going to play up? There's lots of good things about our ministry. What are you going to lead with in your presentation? And then finally, pray and make your call or make your presentation. And I trust that following these tips will enable you to be very well prepared and ready for presenting to a church or group or prayer network partner. And then the last thing I want to talk about, and this is not actually in your slides, I added this a little bit later today, but I really want to encourage everyone to evaluate. And I know this isn't everyone's favorite thing to do, but honestly, I feel like if you can evaluate and keep good records, this will be so motivating to you as you're able to see, wow, 10 of the 12 churches I reached out to participated, or 8 of the 9 groups, or 6 of the 12 prayer network partners. You'll have some numbers that will enable you to see how effective have I been. Or if I haven't been effective, that's even helpful to know. Maybe a bit discouraging, but it's helpful to know, because then you can say, all right, maybe I should tailor my approach a bit. So when you evaluate, I would definitely suggest keep really good records. We have our monthly updates that are very easy to keep records on. We also have an evaluation form, which I'm going to send you after the call. It's very simple. It is an Excel spreadsheet, but it basically lets you list all the churches that you contacted. It lets you keep track of, how did I contact them? Did I make a presentation? Did they attend any of our events? And then it lets you record how many shoeboxes they pack that year. And so if you're keeping track of who you're reaching out to, then the hope would be at the end of the year, when you get your drop-off logs, you'll be able to go back in and see, okay, how many of the people that I made presentations to or that I sent an email to, how many actually participated? And then you're able to see how effective have you been. And so I definitely recommend that you evaluate. It will be very helpful for you as you move forward. And then finally, I am going to share a couple of resources with you, and just want to share a couple of reminders of resources that you already have. There is, in the church relations and in the prayer team member handbook, both of those have sample scripts and sample emails or letters that you can send. And they're really good. I mean, you might want to tweak it a little bit, but they're really good. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel there. You definitely want to make that script your own, but it gives you some good ideas of what to say and how to handle objections that people may have. And for you community relations team members, for whatever reason, our handbook doesn't have it in your section. And so I'm going to send you copies of the one from church relations, and it's easily adaptable to community groups. I'm also going to send you a list of key messages. Like I mentioned before, these are just different ways to approach the ministry. We also have your handbook, and in preparing this presentation, I went back and looked through the handbook, and I was like, man, there's some good information in here. So if you haven't reviewed your handbook in a while, definitely go back and look at your handbook. Really good information there. And then finally, we're going to send you a link to a somewhat cheesy video that Brandon, my coworker, and I put together. But I feel like it could be helpful for some of you who are more visual learners. We did a role play, And so we just kind of acted out, you know, what does this look like when you call somebody? What are some of the key ways to make your message compelling and to get a foot in the door? And so we'll send that to you. And if you'd like to watch that, you are more than welcome to. So that is it. So I'm going to unmute everyone. And I'm also going to turn my video back on. And I'd love to hear from you all. What questions do you have? What challenges do you want to share? What successes would you like to share?
I don't hear anything.
Well, I don't think anybody's saying anything yet. I'm assuming y'all can hear me, right?
Are you going to email our area coordinators the key messages or each individual?
I will email that out to the people that got the invite for this call. So area coordinators would receive that as well.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And one note too, just real quickly, I did record this call. So we will be able to send out a link. So if you have team members or people that weren't able to join that you'd like them to hear the information, we'll be sending a link for the call as well. Any other questions? All right. Well, I don't want to belabor the point if nobody has any questions, but I thank you so much for being on the call, and we'll be praying for you during engagement. I know that it can be a difficult time. There are challenges with it. We know that, and so we want to support you well, to be able to equip you to do what God's called you to do. And so, if you do have particular questions that maybe you just didn't want to ask on the call, please feel free to email me at swishard@samaritan.org or your regional point of contact. We'd be happy to talk through anything that you need with you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone. We value your time and we pray that this was beneficial. So have a good day.